about to die! Salute you!
Begin! You're no longer a slave.
I beg leave to marry my beloved. I'm a free man.
Director Christopher William Johnson gives us another reason to think about the Roman Empire in Gladiators. This is a 2024 Asylum-produced mockbuster, clearly using its the release schedule of Gladiator 2 to churn out this alternative mockbuster, you might say. And the actual plot is actually similar to the original Gladiator movie in some way. Obviously, an Asylum film is very, very low budget. So bear this in mind, obviously, when we're talking about such a movie. It's actually quite impressive that they've attempted to do a historical fiction in some ways because, obviously, things are documented, so you know any inaccuracies and things. Anyway, the story is about primarily this gladiator that wins his freedom at the beginning of the movie, and he kind of wants to celebrate his newfound freedom by marrying the love of his life, which he was unable to do. And she happens to be the daughter of a senator, and he sort of goes to see her. But in the meantime, we have a kind of coup being taken place by another senator who's trying to kind of overthrow the current emperor, and in doing so, kills this gladiator's love interest, her father, her family, and ultimately blames him for it. And such sets up now a gladiator sort of being hunted for a crime he didn't commit. He teams up with a kind of young rookie gladiator to try and, get revenge on the people that have killed his wife and obviously kind of clear his name. At the same time, you've got all the kind of the political machinations going on with the kind of the Senate and the Emperor and stuff. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what works with Gladiators. So this is a surprisingly complex movie for plot-wise for an Asylum film. Normally with Asylum films, it's a very basic plot with, plenty of kind of conversations in rooms and a couple of kind of action sequences. And there are a degree of conversations in rooms and stuff, but nonetheless, I have to say, I think the plot here, at least by Asylum movie standards, is actually fairly complex and actually has a kind of a few moving parts, betrayals, things like that, so different kind of character motivations and reveals. So in actual fact, I will say, certainly, for the broad plot strokes, this is a more complex movie than, say, the majority of films put out by the Asylum. And again, considering the fact this is a low budget, I do think there is some, albeit, muted production value, but there is some production value which I do think makes it, again, look a little better than some Asylum movies. Now, they've obviously used the old trick of, they've got lots of kind of stock footage that they kind of, splice in to give us kind of establishing shots and things like that, to give us, like, the Colosseum and things like this. But I think it works, I think they're actually incorporated really well. And even some of the kind of the stuff that was clearly filmed for this movie, we've still got sort of, Legionnaire type armor and stuff, and some of the set design, not all, but some of the set design is reasonable. And they've actually used kind of green screen to try and, and give some more sort of like grandiose backdrops and things to sort of characters. So I actually, I thought, albeit, I'm used to watching low budget movies, you've got to bear in mind, but I actually thought, again, for a clearly low budget movie, the production design and the kind of the end result that has come out from this clearly low budget movie was actually not bad, I think. The next thing I would say, some of the fight scenes aren't too bad. Again, this movie had probably got quite a quick turnaround, probably not huge amounts of time to choreograph particularly kind of complex kind of fight sequences. But I didn't think the fight sequences were too bad, to be honest. And this movie, which doesn't rely on kind of CGI monsters and things, it is more people in costumes fighting. You might have a, you know, green screen background and stuff, but some of it is shot on location. But again, I thought you know, the fight scenes seemed okay. Again, if you're familiar with watching lower budget action movies, it's kind of like that. But it didn't look awkward. It didn't look too sort of like hokey or silly. The guy they got to play our main gladiator, he looks kind of, you know, quite intimidating. He's a big guy. He looks kind of like a Viking, to be honest. But he made an intimidating kind of leading sort of character here, which I thought was, you know, pretty good. And I. You know, you've got the kind of the scheming kind of Senate and stuff, and they're kind of like the, you know, quite clear sort of good guys and bad guys. It makes it kind of easier to kind of to root for to a degree here. And you know, even some of the conversations in rooms, I still was somewhat intrigued by, because the plot is so dense. You feel like the dialogue sequences that we do have actually have some meaning to it and some sort of you know, reason to be having it, rather than just padding out the runtime with waffle, which is sometimes again what you do get in asylum movies. Okay, so let's turn over that coin and let's talk about what doesn't work. The biggest issue for me, I've got to say, I think some of the acting is pretty poor. Not from everyone, but there are some performances here that are very, very weak and extremely hokey, I have to say. I'm not going to point out particular kind of performances, but there is some in here. Let me just kind of say that, at least in my opinion. So the acting isn't brilliant. I do think, although the plot is relatively complex for an asylum movie, there are some things that are very like convenient and sort of like plot contrivances. You know, we have this kind of young boy who is the son of the current emperor, you know, and he sort of sees something he shouldn't have done, but he happens to leave evidence that he's been there and things like that. So there's kind of like a lot of like typical sort of, you know, things that happen in kind of movies to further the plot that are less than realistic, let's just kind of say that. And, you know, obviously it is low budget, and when I'm putting praise on a movie like this for having a decent production value, don't get me wrong, this is nowhere near the kind of the production value of a mainstream, you know, production. You know, you will only ever see sort of like 2 or 3 kind of like, you know, Romans in the background and things like that. So yeah, although I think there's been a reasonable attempt to have you know some sort of some level of production value, don't be under the illusion that it's anything other than a, you know, a kind of a low budget movie, to be honest. I think some of the story elements here seemed a little forced in. We have our kind of our sort of another gladiator that follows this our main one around, and it's like this young girl, and she has never, you know, in story, she's never actually fought in a gladiator match, and she's kind of very small and sort of like not exactly intimidating, but we're meant to believe she's a great fighter and stuff. And she doesn't really have any impact on the story, I didn't think. It seemed kind of it's completely kind of a pointless character, and I'm assuming it was only in here to have some type of female character that actually does something in the film, really, because other than that, there really isn't many female roles that really have any kind of like weight to them or anything like that. So the character kind of sticks out as well, we've got to have this kind of, you know, representation in here, because, you know, we need to sort of have that. So we need to have a female role, and as such will make it kind of somewhat awkward and somewhat superfluous kind of character to a degree. I do think as the film goes on, I think the setup for the events that transpire here is relatively strong, but I do think there are points where it does kind of spin its wheels a little bit, even though I think some of the plot means this movie is a little more engaging than maybe some asylum films. At times you do think some scenes do end up being a little longer than necessary and things like that. Vernon Wells is the kind of the named actor here, and he's got a small role, as they kind of tend to do in these sort of films, and again, doesn't really amount to a huge amount, to be honest. Overall, I mean, how to rate this movie? I mean, again, you've got to judge it through the lens of this is a low-budget movie. I presume if you're watching this channel, you are familiar with low-budget movies, and in that context, I would say it's probably about an average film. I actually don't think it's a bad film in actual fact. If you can accept the fact that what you're watching is kind of low-budget, I think it's a reasonable attempt from the Asylum to have at least somewhat of an engaging story, and as such, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.